fall, I've just been doing a series of sermons basically that are things that God is teaching me. And it hasn't necessarily been a steady theme throughout, but just some lessons that I've been kind of learning. And this is the last week of that. I'm going to actually go into a shorter sermon series starting next week. That's, now that it's snowing, it does feel like we could be talking a little bit Christmassy. But the idea is leading towards Advent and Christmas, about Jesus, why he came to be with us, why he is part of our world. But I want to come to one last thought of different things that I've kind of been learning the last little bit. And it's to do with the verse that's behind me. In this verse, a series of legal leaders in the Jewish community and some politicians are basically coming up, and they are trying to trip Jesus up in all sorts of different ways. You go back to the beginning of the passage, somebody comes up, and you want to really get people angry. You know what the one topic get everybody worked up? Taxes, right? These leaders walk up to Jesus and try to prod him a little bit about taxes. And he brilliantly evades the question in such a way as to bring honor both to God, but as well kind of kill the controversy, in which he says, yeah, you should pay your taxes. Whose picture's on this? And they say, well, it's the Caesar. It's the Roman Empire. Well, give it to Caesar. Give it back to him. And then they go to a question that if you really want to get people who are church attenders kind of riled up and thrown off their game, what subjects should you talk about? In that case, it has to do with end-time prophecy, because that can kind of get people worked up a little bit. And he brings honor to God. He shows them that the problem isn't their understanding of where this world is headed. The problem is they're not looking at God right. They need to understand God. And then we get this question. Somebody comes along to him and says, okay, if there's all these laws that we find on the Bible, what ones really matter? What ones really matter? It's the second time that Jesus is being asked this question in the Gospels. And he comes and he quotes to them a verse out of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, which is where we find this, but you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is where we find that, Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it's the second time he's being asked a question. The last time he was asked this question was by somebody who wanted an honest answer. What is the greatest of the commandments? And he goes and he tells them, and then this gentleman in Luke's gospel asks him a couple questions about what does it mean to be a neighbor, and the answer has to do with the Good Samaritan story that we know. And he gives that explanation that just because somebody might seem to be your enemy or be far away, they can be your neighbor. Well, here, they're trying to trip him up. What laws really matter? And the heart of it is, can laws be flexible? This lawyer might be hitting on something important. You ever been like me? Drive down the highway. And you might be like me, that sometimes as you're going down the highway, you might be going a little bit beyond what the speed limit says you should do. I'm sure I'm the only one who's ever done this in this congregation, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens if you're driving a little bit above the speed limit? I usually don't go way fast, usually. As you're driving along, if you're going a little bit above, and you come up to somebody, you catch up to somebody, your immediate reaction, at least this is for me sometimes, man, this person's driving a little overcautious. And as somebody catches up to you from behind, man, that person's driving like a maniac. Am I the only one who can relate to that? Probably not. See, what have I done there? And I'm guilty of it. I made the law a little bit arbitrary, right? I've kind of defined it by what I find important. And this lawyer is trying to probe Jesus, trying to see, Do you really understand the law? Are you trying to make certain things more about what makes you comfortable? Do we pick and choose, basically? Because what did I do in that example? Not only am I picking and choosing what law I'm going to obey, I'm judging others on the basis of my preferences, right? And we all tend to do that. There are certain things that really bug us. We judge others by that. There might be other things that are right and wrong that we might skirt around because we don't think they're that important. And we're judging everything by our own standard. And Jesus comes along and says, you're not understanding. You need to focus, because this is the idea of the law. This is the whole idea of scriptures. You need to focus on two things. Really, the whole law is meant to help you to love God and love your neighbor. Those two things. That's really what it comes down to. And Jesus says, I want you to focus on these two things. Love God, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. We're going to focus mostly on the first part of that, loving God. So that's what God has been teaching me a little bit. You know what? It is easy at times to let our hearts grow a little bit cold. Perhaps even a little apathetic to the things of God and to the love of God. And the reason for that might be at one point, things felt really good. We knew God, it felt like He was close by, and maybe it doesn't feel that way anymore. And it's because it's a relationship. It's kind of like every relationship. We start off a friendship, marriage, a parenting relationship. It's all about, there's something emotional there, right? Think of it as with parenting. Keep babies born. Oh man, they're cute. As they get older, though, they're not as cute. And they talk back. And they can challenge us and things like that, right? Why is my son smiling? I don't know, he's shrugging his shoulders now. But it's not that the relationship's gone bad, right? If anything, it's gone deeper. It means more because it has endured some trials. And it means something much more because it's not just, oh, this child is cute anymore. It's, we've overcome problems and we've learned to love each other all the more because of it. It has deeper roots. A true marriage is like that, right? I mean, when a marriage starts off, it's this lovey-dovey relationship. Life can't sustain that forever. But a marriage that works is one where there's something deeper there that, we're learning to overcome life together. Rather than just raw emotion. That's what it should be. That's something deeper. And you know what? That is exactly how it should be with our relationship with God as well. At times, the emotion may not be there in the same way. There are moments where we may not feel as close. But a true relationship goes deeper. A true relationship is not based on emotion. A relationship will either grow deeper or will get stuck. It needs to get beyond an emotional level. Otherwise, what do? We either do what these folks who are opposed to Jesus do. We make it legalistic. We turn it all about, I did this today. Okay, God wanted me to read my Bible, check. Wanted me to pray, check. Wanted me to do this, love my neighbor. Okay, I think I did that, check. It becomes a checklist, right? It becomes heartless. It just becomes about the form. That's what we call legalism. Or it becomes about just wistfully wishing that I could get back to an emotional level. Maybe when I don't have that, developing an ounce of bitterness. That certainly happens in relationships we have with people, isn't it? Man, these folks have replaced the love of God with legalism. Sometimes we replace it with this emotional idea. God calls on us that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That's depth. We need to work on that relationship with God, exploring God, knowing an infinite God that we will never fully figure out. Trying to understand God at new levels, developing new practices, new ways of looking at our Christian life. Exploring God in new ways so that we discover more and more and wanting with all our heart to know that this is what we want. There's a story of a young man, a teenager, who was out playing basketball on the driveway with a couple of his friends. As he was playing, something happened. It knocked out his contact lens. Spent a couple of minutes looking for it. Went into the house, announced to his mom, well, you're going to need to order me a new contact lens. Mom didn't say anything. She just went outside. About 5 minutes later, she came back and said, here's your contact lens. He said, how on earth did you find that on our driveway in all that space? And she said, simple. You were looking for a little tiny invisible piece of plastic. I was looking for $150. That's the difference, right? Passion of finding it. Do you know what? When we have the passion to find God, He is there to be found. He wants us to find Him. He wants us to discover more and more about Him. We need to find ways to make it grow. There are two gardeners. One who goes to the garden every day, weeds, digs up what they need to dig up, moves the soil around, fertilizes, waters. And one who kind of tosses some seed in the ground and then comes back in September and hopes there's some vegetables there. Who's going to have the more successful garden? As we cultivate, things grow. And that is very much true in our spiritual lives. The one gardener will find it worthwhile. The other's going to look at that and say, well, that was a waste of time, right? Because all I came back and found was weeds. And maybe the odd carrot trying to grow it amongst them. There takes some cultivations. Gary Thomas, in a book called Sacred Pathways, which is a book that I'm learning from, that I'm coming back to in this sermon, said this: some of us live with the mistaken impression that our faith needs only to be planted, not tended. And he goes on to compare that the Christian life can very quickly become about self-absorption. It becomes a convenience. It becomes all about me. And others who cultivate the faith and do the work of developing it, who learn to worship God, find that it's not all about me. The more that I cultivate the Christian life, the more I discover that it is all about Jesus. And nothing is about me. It is so easy to turn about me. Who has the deep roots? It's the one who has found that the first and the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God. Instead, there's so many in the faith who somebody says something that offends me, and I can't see anything else. Or there's a group out there who don't think the way that I think about it, and all I can see is that group, those people out there who I struggle with. My neighbor might upset me. My family might disappoint me. And all those things, it becomes all about me. But I'm to love God with everything. To be able to set aside those things that distract me, to pull me away. Do you know God also has a greatest commandment? We have a greatest commandment here. This is our greatest commandment. This is what God says for us. You know He has a greatest commandment for Himself? Do you know what His greatest commandment is? Love my creation with all my heart and soul and mind. To the point that I am willing to sacrifice everything, that they may know salvation and love and hope. That is God's greatest commandment. Does that sound funny to say? God's greatest commandment? That is God's greatest commandment. He will love us. And do you know what? We only respond to Him. We respond to His act of love. As I was talking about our conference there a few minutes ago that we were at all week, there's a song that we kind of sang at every session. You know, there's always kind of one song that gets picked at these conferences that you sing every session. And I actually tried to see if I could find a recorded version we could sing along to this morning. I couldn't. But a really powerful song called Waymaker. I played it as people were walking in this morning. I'll play it again as we're going out. Mostly want to point out today because there is a bridge in it that has a very interesting line. And the bridge of the song says this: when I do not see it, you are at work. When I do not feel it, you are at work. Very simple little bridge. When I do not see, that doesn't mean that God's not at work. When I do not feel it, that does not mean God's not at work. God is always at work behind the scenes. He is always bringing His love to us in remarkable, deep ways. We were talking about this at this conference. There were some remarkable stories I got to hear. President of the Christian Missionary Alliance, a gentleman by the name of David Hearn, was talking about that 3 weeks earlier he had been in northern Iraq. Think of any place in the world you least like to be, the northern Iraq. It was in northern Iraq working with a group of churches that has come out fairly recently after the whole Iraq fell apart, not the first time way back with the Gulf War, but after ISIS started to split the country a few years back. And particularly in the northern part of the country, there was tremendous suffering among a minority people group there, the Yazidis. And the gospel has been moving forward at a rapid rate since then. Churches have been started and founded amongst people who suffered mightily. Many people in the churches that have started are women who, as ISIS kind of took over for a period of time there, used them as sex slaves. Horrible situation. And now God is moving in a mighty way, sometimes very directly confronting people with the truth of the gospel. And He told us the story of this church in northern Iraq. Nearby is the city of Mosul, which was the center of ISIS. It was the heartbeat of everything going on there. And while the city is being retaken now, there are ISIS cells all over the city. It is a dangerous place. It is approximately in the area, if you know your Bible geography, around Nineveh. Interesting place. You know where Nineveh is? Nineveh comes up in the Bible in the prophet Jonah. Jonah is told to go to Nineveh and spread the good news about God, and he refuses. And he says why he refuses. He says this: I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster. In other words, Jonah doesn't want to go there because he's afraid God's going to forgive them. That's how much he hates those people. You know what? People of Mosul went up to the Yazidi people and treated them like garbage. Pastor of the church went to a few people and said, you know what? I want you to go to Mosul. I want you to go down to that city, and I want you to bring food, because they're starving there. And I want you to bring the news of the gospel. And do you know what the response was? This was the response that we were told. Thought about it for a few minutes and came back and said, yes, on one condition. If we are martyred, you need to make sure our children are looked after. Put that in the context of all our problems. Here are people willing to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes because they love God. There is only one reason you would do that. Because there's more to be found in the love of God than anything else. Hebrews chapter 11 says this: there were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Mark chapter 8, Jesus says this: what good is it to gain the whole world but to lose your own soul? The reason they would do this is because there is more to be gained by learning the love of God than anything that this world has. And at times we may be offended and love our grudges more than God. Man, we can miss out. The main speaker of this conference was actually a Congolese missionary. Now, some of us in this room have been to Congo. There's two countries called Congo. There's the little former French colony that we went to. There's the much bigger colony that used to be a Belgian Congo. This has to do with the bigger country than we went to. We went to the little one. The big one in the middle of Africa, with Kinshasa as its capital, is a mess. The country's falling apart. There's barely government in some parts of the country. There is poverty. Things are struggling. And we had this Congolese missionary speak to us. Now, what's interesting about this Congolese missionary? He's not a missionary to Congo. He's a missionary to Canada from Congo. Coming from a place of disaster to a place like here. Because we need the gospel. It's actually heading the church, the Alliance churches in Quebec. Interesting that we need it now. I heard the story of a gentleman who's heading an Alliance work in India. A democratic nation where the party that's being elected is a Hindu nationalist party that is intent on destroying Christianity. And church leaders there, we saw a video of them, who are welcoming the victory of their enemies into government and praying fervently for their leaders and saying that it is good to have a government that is hostile to us, because otherwise the church will get weak and lazy. It is better to have the government hate us and to learn to love Jesus. Man, that's a long way to go for us, isn't it? Things are getting hard in Canada, and they're going to get harder. We're seeing people leave the church. We're seeing a society that might be becoming increasingly hostile against us, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it is going to continue down that path. That maybe we're going to see government and nation turning more and more against the church. And we have two options at that moment to say. Two things we can say. Two things we can think. Two things we can believe. We can either believe that God is defeated, or that maybe this is happening because God is not defeated and He's victorious. Is it possible that He is calling the church back to a deeper love of itself because we become too self-absorbed, too interested in petty issues, too moved by personal comfort, too interested in the latest gossip, rather than falling deeper in love with Jesus? And as society turns away from God, maybe it's to push us back to the heart of what He is doing. Because God is surely at work. God might be forcing us to turn deeper to Him. Not with an emotional response, but with deep-rooted faith that says, yes, God is who he says he is. God is our strength and our might and our salvation. And we will love him with all of our hearts because he is worthy of our love and he is taking us somewhere great. We need to refocus our lives back to tending the spiritual lives of our garden so that we are understanding more the love of God. He takes us on some unique paths. Our greatest goal is to love God. Therefore, we must continually work at finding deeper ways to love God. We need to find ways to open ourselves up to the love of God. God has given us the Bible. What a resource. And I got to be honest with you, there are times I sit down with my Bible in the morning and it does become kind of a quick checklist, so I got to get this read. And yet here is a gift God has given us to understand his heart, and we should be seeing it that way. At times, I know my prayers can be a quick laundry list of, God, can you just look after this? Of all the things that I want him to do. And that's an okay start, but it should be, God, I want to love you with all my heart. Help me to seek you with all of who I am. Help me to understand the things that block me from truly loving you. Help me to go deeper in my relationship with you. That's the opportunity that I have every day. We're all unique. You know that we need to find unique ways to understand who God is. On November 24th after church, we've done this a couple of times. We've done a potluck lunch and then an hour of extra teaching time, deeper teaching time. We've done that for a few months now. Did a couple times last year. And we're going to look at some unique ways, some spiritual temperaments that can help us love God deeper. Decided to put 2 weeks between this sermon and then, so we have some time to prepare for it. But November 24th, how do we know God? What is our temperament? What I mean by that is, I'm an academic. I went to university for a year. I love to sit down with the Bible and just tear it apart. Like, not literally, but to take this sentence that, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and mind, and study it and understand, well, what does this word mean? Why does Jesus choose this verb? And how does it all work together? And how does that fit in history? And just, I can get lost spending hours going down rabbit trails and studying this verse to its ultimate conclusion, try to understand everything he said. You know what? Not everybody likes that. I do like it quiet while I'm doing that, but I like to study and keep my mind active. There's other people who can just like to sit in the silence before God and just not necessarily say anything, but just listen in case God speaks to them. And I gotta be honest, I've tried that. My mind does not allow me to stop. I can't sit quietly. My mind starts going. Is there anything wrong with me? Not necessarily. It's that I have one way, one temperament there, that there's something that helps me to love God. And somebody else might have other ways. You know what? That's good. We should explore all sorts of creative ways because God is not limited by how I work. God can find all sorts of creative ways to help me grow in him. And it's to do with how I'm wired, how I'm created. And that's okay. So on November 24th, we're going to take some time. We're going to walk through 10 different temperaments. It's not that God's limited to 10. We're going to look at 10 of them and say, where do you fit? And maybe finding a way that helps you love God deeper. How can you love God? Ways to know God. Finding creativity and continually to explore. How can I know Jesus? Because Jesus loved us so much. And we see examples that I've given of people who've learned that the love of God matters more than life itself. It matters more than anything else in this world. How do we get there? How do we want to get there? What blocks you from knowing God? What sin, doubt, struggle is keeping you from knowing God fully? We need to confess to God. We need to have it wiped away by Him so we can be opened up to fully, completely, and absolutely loving our Savior. We're going to sing in closing hymn. I'm going to invite our worship team up as we sing hymn number 51 in response to this God who has loved us so deeply.